Hey heroes, welcome to On Scene First. I'm your host, Tracy Eldridge. With over 25 years in public safety, I am wicked excited and honored to bring you entertaining, educational, and empowering conversations with public safety difference makers who are harnessing the power of out-of-the-box thinking when it comes to the use of the latest and greatest must-have technology tools, a people-first leadership approach, and mental health resources to save lives on both sides of the call. Before we get started, I would like to thank our hero sponsor, Squad Life, a law enforcement and Army veteran-owned company based in Long Island, New York. As the On Scene First merchandise production and distribution partner that provides quality, custom-made products, fundraising and partnership opportunities, and phenomenal customer service, we are thrilled to share them with the rest of our public safety family. Make sure you check them out at www.squad-life.com and tell them Tracy sent you. Now, on with the show. All right, so I am wicked excited to have my guest today, Tommy Bolin. So first, Tommy, how are you? I got to ask that first.
Yeah, I'm good. Everything's going great.
You're good. You're good today. Today's a good day, right?
Today's a great day. Yeah.
I always say, like, when someone asks, how are you? I first respond with fan-friggin-tastic and and that my feet hit the floor today. It's a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Yep.
And especially in the job that we do. So for those of my listeners that have no idea who you are, but they are going to know you because we kind of worked on something together that I'm super excited about that we'll talk about. But for those that don't know you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? What I would love for you to do is kind of start off at the beginning of your career. So tell us who you are today and then and kind of go back and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tom Bolin. I go by Tommy. I'm a 30-year veteran in the fire service where I've served as a firefighter paramedic. We talk about like back in the day. When I first came to the fire service, kind of what got me to this point where I'm at now. When we first came in, we never talked about mental health. We never dealt with it.
True story.
You were expected to, you're kind of told if you can't handle the job, you might want to find another career. And it was a terrible way to deal with it. It was kind of a sign of weakness. We just never, we never addressed the issues. And so over the years, I've had some pretty obviously horrific runs over the years. I've had a lot of children fatalities throughout my career, a lot of suicides. And it was, it's just those things that you just kind of put them on a shelf. You just never talk about them. But it wasn't just, leading up to so I had a really bad time in 2019. It was kind of like leading up to that. Every year, starting around probably 2014, 15, I noticed just things weren't right. There were things that I was depressed. I was going through some anxiety, and I didn't know why. And every year, it just seemed like it got worse and worse and worse. And I didn't know why. I didn't deal with it. I just didn't know why. So leading
Tommy,
up to
quick question about that. So when you say that, like in 2019, as you were going through it, did you notice it, or when you look back on it, you noticed it? Because I think that's important. Because I think a lot of folks just have kind of blinders on.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I really noticed it. I just knew something wasn't right. Like with me, I knew that. I was just miserable. I was depressed. I was easily angered. Unfortunately, my wife took, a lot of that, and God bless her because she stuck with me and she knew the man that she married was in there. So I don't really think I realized the extent of it. I just thought maybe it was just like a bad phase or something like that. But as time went on, it just continually got worse and worse and worse. And then in 2019 is when I came very close to taking my life. And, if it wasn't, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I had been drinking a lot, which is what a lot of us do. We were self-medicating, just trying to feel normal, just trying to feel anything, honestly. And 2 o'clock in the morning, I came home and I grabbed my gun. Went downstairs, and that was the point where I you know I was ready to end my life. I was done. I was going to do it, and I was down there with the gun on my head, and I was putting pressure on the trigger and praying to God to forgive me, praying for my family to forgive me for what I was about to do. And at that moment, I mean, things happen. I think is too much coincidental. But at that moment, my college age son, came home at 2 o'clock in the morning and came running down the stairs. And he came in the front door, heard the front door shut, and then all of a sudden he came running downstairs. And I stopped, put my gun on my chest, and shut my eyes, act like I was asleep. And he came down. He wasn't stupid. He had been seeing what was going on in my life. As a matter of fact, my kids didn't want to come around because they
Yeah.
couldn't stand to see what I was doing with my life. I had two college age kids at the time, and they didn't want to come home. My other son was there. Unfortunately, he dealt with a lot of it too. But in that moment, he saved my life, and even that moment wasn't a wake up call for me. Like um, I knew it was bad. I harbored a lot of guilt from that because of my son coming down and finding me in that moment. I mean, how can you not? No, no kid should ever have to witness that from their father. So after that, I kind of just put it back on the shelf again and said, man, I can't do this. I can't do this. And honestly, it didn't really come to a head until probably a few months later. I had, again, I was at a golf outing. My son was driving us around, which was another thing. And um, I just remember something so trivial that happened, and I got angry with him. And I didn't realize how bad it was until he went home and my wife called me and was really upset. He was really upset. And the next morning when I got to the firehouse, I went back and looked at my text messages after I had that verbal altercation with him. And when I started reading the text messages, my heart just dropped to my stomach, and I couldn't
How
believe
old
the
how
thing.
old was your son at that time?
At that time, I think he was about 16, maybe 17. He was driving.
Yeah.
So when I looked at that, like I said, my heart sunk to my stomach, and I had just lost all purpose in life. Everything that I was going through, I just lost all purpose. I had really no will to live, and the only thing that actually kept me driving forward was my kids. My kids, and then all of a sudden, I felt like I lost that. Like I said, because I didn't want to come around or anything like that. So as uh, so after that moment, the next morning at the firehouse, I remember uh, Googling firefighter mental health. And the first thing that came up was this place called the IFF Center of Excellence. It's just for firefighters. It's a mental health facility. And I sent it to my wife and I said, hey, what do you think about this? And she says, you need to go. You need to go. And what she wasn't telling me was, you need to go because I'm done. I can't
Yeah.
do this no more. I can't stand to see what you're doing to yourself. I can't stand to see what you're doing to the kids and to me. And I'm done. So I asked her that day if she would make the phone call, and because I was at the firehouse, I didn't want to get emotional at the firehouse. I didn't want to get interrupted with a run. So the next morning, when I came home, she said, "Hey, I made this phone call. Will you call him?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll give him a call." So I call the guy, and I just remember in that moment, after a few formalities were out of the way, he said, "Hey, Tommy, I just want you to know this isn't your fault." And I'm thinking in the back of my head, and I didn't say it out loud, but I'm thinking in the back of my head, how can you tell me that this is not my fault? I mean, the stuff that I've done, the suicide attempt with my son walking down on me, the alcohol, the drinking, just being angry all the time. How can you tell me this isn't my fault? And I just remember him saying, "Listen, you have no idea how many people just like you are going through this. It's not your fault." And in that moment, nobody ever told me that. Um, and I started getting emotional. I started getting emotional.
I'm
So
getting
yeah,
emotional right now. And the reason why I'm getting emotional is because one of the things that I say in my class all the time is, PTSD and the stuff that we deal with, it's not what's wrong with us. It's what happened to
right.
us, right? And so when you say that it's not your fault, I feel like fault gets applied when you do something wrong, right? And
Right. Yeah.
so what you just said and what I said say just came full circle, and that's why I was feeling a little emotional. So keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we'll get to the, that stuff I think a little later because I think it's very important to
Yeah,
understand why we go through these things. So yeah, within a week after that, I was on a plane heading to Baltimore, Maryland, to Marlborough, Maryland, to the IFF Center of Excellence, and I spent 31 days there dealing with my stuff.
good for
And
you.
yes, so it's crazy how like we're kind of leading up to where I am now. So when I first got there, they take everything from you. It's like it's also not just a mental health facility; it's a drug and rehab facility too. And it's amazing how many people are. Mine was was alcohol trying to cope, but it's amazing all the drugs and stuff that are going on with people trying to cope and still functioning or not even still kind of functioning and working.
Yeah.
So they take everything from you. The first week, I go through all these trauma classes. I see multiple social workers, psychiatrist, Dr. Abby, who was amazing, and a medical doctor. And by the end of the week, they gave me a formal diagnosis, and they diagnosed me with major depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Oh,
My
D,
drinking,
all of the above. I have all those
I'll be
too.
like, yeah,
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah,
We can be
yeah,
besties.
absolutely. I think we are. But so yeah, so they didn't put me in the drug and rehab side because they said that they felt that my drinking was just a symptom of all my stuff. I wasn't drinking every day. My problem is I was drinking a lot of hard alcohol and to try to mask my pain. Now at the end there, I was drinking every day, but for the most part, I don't drink every day, and it was more the hard alcohol just trying to suppress all those thoughts and that whirlwind that goes through your mind because you just can't shut it off.
Yeah.
So I got my
And I think,
phone.
and I just want to jump in there. So another
Yeah,
one of the things that I say is I didn't drink a lot, right? So
yeah,
same thing is it wasn't that I was, and I don't even think that when I was going through that time that I would say, oh, I think I want to drink. But I 100% say I didn't have a drinking problem. I
hmm
had a problem drinking.
yeah,
And I say that because no, I didn't even drink every week. But when I did choose to drink, I went from 0 to 60 very
right.
quickly.
That's
And
where I was.
then the stuff would come out. And I wasn't a very pleasant, intoxicated person at that time. So, no, not a drinking problem, but definitely a problem drinking to that point where it was like, okay, got to fix this. Wow. Yep. Yeah, I was gonna ask you. So you were still actively working when you took that time off, correct? Yep. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep. And just what year was that? How long ago was that? Okay. Yep. Okay. I know you said 2019 was, but I didn't know if like, yep. Okay. Yep. And then we ran right into COVID, so that was fun. Right. Yeah. 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 And I think, I mean, I when I the first time I actually shared my PTSD story was by accident, but I know now it wasn't by accident. Like it was just very specifically designed to be at that moment. I was at a conference. I'm pretty sure it was in North Carolina, and they had a speaker that canceled. And they were going to do a session on stress. So one of the folks, one of my dear friends down there said, "Hey, can you fill in? Because I know you talk about stress, but can you fill in? Because we don't want to cancel the session." I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I ran up to my room, grabbed a few slides, and I went down. And when I went to go speak, I didn't actually use any of the slides. I shared my story because that's what was supposed to happen at that moment. And by the end of that session, I was crying, they were crying, we were all crying. The amount of people that came up to me afterwards saying like, "You're telling my story." And I knew, like, in that moment that, yes, at the time I was working for Rapid SOS, I was teaching sessions on our technology and all that stuff. But I got permission from my boss at the time and said, "Hey, if I'm going to be at these conferences anyway, can I submit to teach this session?" And then I'm very proud to be one of the front folks in the 911 space that started screaming their story from the rooftops out loud in front of everybody where it wasn't in the dark and secretive and all that stuff. So I can for sure empathize with what you see after you start sharing your story. So good on you, brother. So Tommy, you're still employed as a career firefighter, correct?
Correct.
And so I would assume you would attribute going to get the help, putting the tools in the toolbox to being able to still be there. Because I know when I'm struggling, I will go to my go to tools, which for me
Yeah.
is EMDR, but I can't always get there, right? So if I'm
Yep.
traveling or whatever, so you have to build this toolbox of stuff. Would you say that taking these steps, getting in the program, finding the tools is what allowed you to kind of stay in that profession that I'm sure you love?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Without a doubt, if I wouldn't have went to Maryland and learned those tools and those coping mechanisms, I would have either been fired or I would have taken my life. I couldn't function anymore. So yes, going to get that help is 100% why I was able to continue my career and keep going, doing what I'm doing.
And it sounds like your leadership team was supportive.
Yes, it was rough at first trying to go. I won't get into all that detail,
Yeah, and
but
that's fine. I think, but at the end of the day, you're still there.
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm still there and I'm still here. So yes.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a big deal. But I also think that a lot of times our leadership teams, and not to say because I don't know the story and I don't need to know the story. I know that we all go through our challenges, etc. But I think sometimes when folks out, so I'll encourage people like if you're struggling, let somebody know. And some folks are like, yeah, my leadership team doesn't view mental health as being a thing. And I think a lot of
Right.
times I would refer to that sometimes as an error of ignorance, not intention.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was, and I'm not saying they weren't supportive because they
Yeah.
were. I think it's
Yeah.
just the fact that I was the very first one to come and say, "Hey, listen, I'm dealing with this," and we've never had it happen before.
Yeah, you're
So
you're charting uncharted waters, right? You're
correct.
navigating uncharted waters.
I think they were trying to check all the boxes and do the right things, but
Yeah.
I don't think just because this was the first time, I don't think they really we were all trying to muddle our way through it. How's that sound?
Yeah.
And
And
since I
that's fair.
went, yeah, and since I went, honestly, things have gotten a lot better. Like people go now and they come back and everything's good. Everybody's supportive. I had a very supportive department. I had a very supportive group of people who supported me through the firehouse. You know, and I like to actually kind of mention this too. The funny thing is we get this preconceived notion in our head of how things are going to go,
Yep.
how things are going to, how things are going to happen. And when I talked to my chief at the time, I said, if you don't mind, I'd really like the opportunity to go talk to my guys and let them know before you put me on the calendar for 30 days. So I walked in that morning at roll call and I was like, "Hey, fellas, I just want to let you know, I'm struggling pretty bad. My depression, my anxiety, my PTSD, my drinking's out of control. I'm going to Baltimore, Maryland. I'm going to go to the IFF Center of Excellence. I'm going to get some help." And you think that you get this thought in your head of how it's going to act or how it's going to happen, and something amazing happened in that moment. One of the guys looked at me and he goes, "Hey, Tommy," he goes, "we love you. We got your
Hmm.
back." He goes, "Go get the help you need." All of them came up and hugged me and said,
Oh,
yeah, and said they love me. And in that moment, I wasn't their boss. I was
yeah.
their fellow brother who was struggling. And these guys had my back. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that from these guys. And like I said, it never usually goes the way you think it's going to
Yeah.
go.
Well,
And,
because I'm
and
sure
it,
you had a fear that it was going to be what the traditional fire service could be. Like, dude, are you serious? Like, you can't
right,
handle, you knew what you were getting into, like, blah, blah,
right.
blah. As they turn around and walk away, and they're like, oh, crap, I'm jealous that he's getting the help that I should probably be getting as well.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. And then all those things in your mind. Are they going to think I'm weak? Are they going to think? Are they even going to want to work for me? Are they going
Yeah.
to trust me? And honestly, the funny thing is now that I've been vulnerable and I invest in my people, um, I've had people come to me and spill their guts because they know that I'll listen
Yeah.
and they know that I'll treat them. I'll do the right thing. And it's amazing, when, vulnerability, I talk about this in my book. It's not weakness. I mean, vulnerability is one of the true measures of courage. And if you just learn to be vulnerable sometimes and talk about your feelings, you'll be amazed um, at how people will treat you and how people will look at you. It's really changed my perspective on things.
Same. I think you're 100% right. I've been a talker my entire life. I've always overshared things, etc. But the one thing I wasn't oversharing was the darkness that I was in my home.
Yeah.
My dear friend Ryan Dedman, he always talks about this, like, 10 scale, that when we ask each other, how are you? A lot of times we're like, yeah, we're fine, we're fine. And he says, you really need to get better at asking things like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being amazing, where are you? And so when I first heard him say that in a class, I leaned over to my coworker and I said, I'm a 3 trapped in a 10's body. And that puts so much into perspective for me,
Yeah.
because when I look back on who I was, like, prior to the band-aid getting ripped off and exposing wounds that were not healed, I was a 10. Like, I was always positive and fun and having the parties and being the life of the party. And then I
Mhm.
wasn't.
Yep.
And so I lost a lot of friends. I lost people who didn't understand what was going on. And then, inside, I when I was still trying to be who I was, it was fake.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, it's
fake.
crazy. It's crazy you say that because, we all put on these different masks. The thing is, when I went in and told my guys that day about what I was going through, they had no idea. They had
Right?
no
No.
idea that I was struggling because we hide it well. And it's crazy the things that we carry that if we would just reach out and talk. So there are people out there that care. And
Yeah.
if you would just reach out, that's the biggest hurdle is just reaching out and saying, I need help. That's the biggest
Well,
hurdle we go through.
and so going back to your story, so I haven't I've shared it in classes. I haven't shared it in recording yet, about my moment that you referred to at the beginning where someone had inadvertently reached in. Um, I had made my mind up, and it wasn't until someone inadvertently reached in. I'll just say, very similar to your story. I
Mhm.
just haven't put it out there yet. I will. I will someday. Um, but what I realized is that in that moment, when my brain and my body had kind of disassociated, I wasn't going to reach out, and so I like little sayings. And, I definitely, one of the sayings that I say all the time is, if you're struggling, reach out. And then for those that can't, we have to get better at reaching in, because, yes, some people do reach out. But
Yes.
then there's folks that are not going to reach out, that we have to reach into. We have to check in. We have to, let them know that they matter and that we're thinking of them. Even just a simple message like that,
Mhm.
because we don't know what people are going through. I know my team, saw that I was struggling. I was very emotional. My fuse was short, but they knew I was dealing a lot with bad leadership. um, but when I go back, and I mean, I think they felt bad, but nobody ever just said, "Hey,
Right.
are you okay?"
Yeah. 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 And
And
I
so in
agree
a
with that.
leadership position for you, like, that was an amazing leadership moment for you to be like, "Nah, I'm not okay."
I'm not okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I've gone through that. And, I had something else to that too, that where we do reach out and somebody's not prepared to handle it
Yeah.
and nothing ever happens. So, I was throwing up all the red flags. I was isolating at work all the time. And that was twofold. I don't mind saying it on here, but that was twofold. I was in a very toxic environment. And a lot of the times I was isolating to get away from that toxic environment. But it was also the fact that I was just tired and depressed, and I had anxiety real bad. And I was isolated. And, isolation is not our friends. Isolation is the
No.
work we do. And I did, I reached out to my wife. So I was sitting on the floor and I was begging her for help. I was just, I was bawling my eyes out. I didn't know why I felt the way I did. I just knew that I was miserable with my life. And God bless her. She's always been my rock. She's always been there for me. But she didn't understand. She didn't understand what I was going through. She doesn't understand the first responder community. Um, and I'll even go into that even further. What is that? Even when I started seeking help with therapists and stuff like that, it's very important to vet the therapists that we send first
Yeah.
responders to, because a lot of them weren't trauma informed and they didn't understand the world we lived in. And sometimes, for me especially, it was very detrimental to my recovery.
Yep.
So we really need to do better at vetting these professionals, and also have things in place, policies and procedures in place, that if somebody comes to you with a problem like this and you don't know what to do, it gets kicked up to the right person, the peer support person, or whoever that may be, and you follow up. You follow up with that person, and you follow up with that peer support person. And we do that now. If I know somebody's struggling, they'll usually come to me and talk. But
Yep.
if somebody else is struggling, we might send Heath over, and Heath goes over and talks to them. And we need to get better about this. We really do.
We do. And there has to be something in place because I know when I travel around the country, I meet a lot of heroes, a lot of them, and I tell them I'm a safe place. And, but I also tell them, like, if you call me, I might have to refer you to somebody else, like, depending on kind of where you're at when you call me. I got a call from a dispatcher in Missouri. Well, I got a message in my inbox on my On Scene First page. He wasn't in a good way.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with that. And so in that moment, I'm like, oh, I'm back in the 911 center. Like, what do I do with this, right? And so I reached out to my network in Missouri, and I was just like, hey, I got a guy that I need to get somewhere, and I use that network, and
Yeah.
the folks that my friend Cheryl and Pam, like, within a very short period of time, he was where he needed to be. But again, it's having that preparation in advance, right?
Right.
So you mentioned your podcast. So I know, we're going to have to wrap up in a little bit, but I want to hear about your book. So ironically, you found me, and
Yes.
I don't know where you found me. So I would love to know, kind of, because I get messages a lot, and then it was like you just boom appeared and you're like,
Yeah.
hey. So if you could just let me know, like, how that happened, that would be
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I just think that things happen. The two things are coincidence.
Yeah.
I believe God's put me in the right places at the right time, and it's happened so many times over the last couple of years. But I reached out, so I was writing this book, and I wanted to highlight all the different professions, all of them. Fire, police, military, dispatchers, corrections officers. Is like the suicide rate with corrections officers is insane.
Yeah.
So I did a podcast a few years back called After the Tones Drop.
Yep.
I think did you? I think you
I didn't
did.
do that. I didn't do that one yet. No.
Okay. So I ran into, I can't remember if it was AK Dazani. Do you know her?
Yes. AK.
So,
Yes. Okay.
so that's what it
Yes,
was.
that was the connection. Yep.
Okay, so that's it. So I did a podcast. AK did a podcast. I also ran into AK a couple years ago when I went and lectured to the up in her area, like 2 hours from here. I
Yep.
lectured to their county peer support team, and we met and talked. And I think when I did After the Tones Drop, Aaron mentioned AK, and I'm like, let me call AK, see if she'll want to be in my book. So I called her and I was like, yeah, now I'm looking for a dispatcher. And she's like, oh, I got somebody. So that's when she gave me your info, and
Gotcha. Okay.
that's how I reached out to you. Yeah,
Yeah, I just want to give AK a plug too, because she just wrote a book, and we're going to talk about
you
your
did.
book. But she did write a book, and she is on my podcast. So go back a few episodes. I don't remember the numbers off the top of but she is on there as well. I found her on TikTok. Right. So
Okay.
she has
Yeah.
a huge presence on TikTok, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I felt super connected to her. And now she's one of my dearest friends in this journey. And she helped me out one time. I was home, and I I was having a full blown panic attack. We had a house full of people, and I got triggered, and I'm out on the front lawn in tears. And she was the one that I called, and
Yeah.
she was able to kind of just bring me
Yeah.
down. And so putting these tools and this network and these people, like Chris Moore, I don't know if you know Chris Moore. He's amazing. He's going to be on my podcast soon too. He got a call from me one time. Um,
I think we're lecturing together. He's on the card too in Kentucky here in a couple months in May.
Yep. So
So
I had a situation that happened, and he just happened to be the one that I called in that moment. Because why? Because Chris puts his phone number out there and says, "Hey, I'm here."
yeah,
And
I
in
do
that
too.
moment,
It's on my website. So
and in that moment, I'm like, you know what? Chris is the one. Chris got my call today. So I do know the importance of reaching out when we need it. But I also know the importance of reaching in. So let's get back to your book.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
title of your book, tell me about it and how
Unseen
it's set
battles.
up, because I think it's super
Yeah,
cool.
it's called Unseen Battles, and
Unseen battles.
Unseen Battles, and the when I first started, if you really knew me, and like all my friends, like there's like they would never in a million years thought I'd write a book. So I was talking to somebody a while back, and I just feel that there's some, this has become my new purpose.
Yep.
Going around lecturing, talking, spreading this word around. And I had somebody say you should write a book, and I'm like, I don't know, and she's like, well, it'll give you more exposure. It'll give you more exposure. It'll give you more opportunities to go out and talk to people. And I really didn't think of it in that light. But as the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're right, because I'm kind of in my own little bubble here in Ohio. I did go to Fairfax, Virginia, last year and lectured to their whole, all of them there in Fairfax. And but I don't get a lot of speaking engagements because I just don't put myself out there like I should.
Yep.
So I decided to write this book, and I read a lot of books from other first responders, military, fire, police, and somebody told me, like, you need to write a book that highlights all the professions. We need to bring everybody to the table. And I never really thought about that. And as the more and more I thought about, man, you're right. We need to, like I said earlier in the podcast, this isn't just a fire issue. This is
Yeah.
all people who are on the front line of trauma.
Yep.
This is all of them. So I really, just imagine what we can do if we bring everybody to the table, everybody, and share what we've learned and what's worked and what hasn't worked. We're better together, right?
Yep.
So it's all about connections. It's all about bringing people together. It's my story mixed in with other stories. It also highlights like I said earlier, about the science behind the brain and how all this stuff works. It talks about resilience techniques. One of the things I do stress in my book is, which I went through it, and I'm sure everybody does. We all learn different. We all heal different. We're all
Yep.
from different backgrounds. We're all from different upbringings and different moral values, and, different chemicals even in our brains. So one thing I stress is, just because you go to somebody and it doesn't work doesn't mean that you're not going to find somebody out there that you'll resonate with and that you will get the help you need. You need to be persistent. You need
I
to
agree.
keep fighting for yourself.
Yep. I agree. And so I do. So my treatment of choice is EMDR. Have you done EMDR?
So EMDR was a game changer for me.
Yep.
And I know people who have done EMDR and they didn't like it. And that's, like I say in my book, it's like every
Yep.
tool in the toolbox. Every
And
tool in the toolbox. The funny thing is, I wrote down a study here just because so there was a 2022 study about EMDR and PTSD, and it says there was an increased or there was a reduced of PTSD symptoms within 60% within the first 3 months. And so I still do EMDR when I
same.
struggle with stuff. I still do it, and I love it. I think it's amazing.
I've probably, when I sat down and tried to figure it out, like the amount of times that I've gone, how many years I've been going, I've probably done over 100 sessions, and I will
Yeah,
continue to do it for the rest of my life. Like I
yeah,
got into an accident last year. I went and did EMDR. Why? Because I drive that road back from the airport, the screeching tires, the beeping horn. My kid was on the phone. She screamed my name when she heard it. Like all of those things, every one of those things attaches somewhere in your body, and
yeah,
it's going to stay there. And so to know that, and to know like, all right, hey, I'm not feeling a certain way about this, but I know that I could. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just try to put this away where it belongs.
yeah,
And the reason why I had asked you that, to go back to that, is I've had folks too say, oh, I tried EMDR once, it didn't work. Well, it's really important that when you pick whatever that mode of therapy is going to be, or that modality for treatment for you, is when I started EMDR, my therapist tried to do the eye movement thing, but I have severe ADHD and I could
Yeah.
not focus on her little light thing. And I kept looking past her. And so, no, it didn't work. But then she's like, you know what? We're going to use the vibrating paddles for you. And
That's what I use.
so I put the vibrating paddles, one in each hand. I could close my eyes, and that was the game changer for me. So just because one version of something doesn't work, it doesn't mean that that it's not going to work. And then expecting something like to me with my first EMDR appointment, it reduced what I had processed that first time, that first night. Like it was done. It
Yeah.
was put away. It's
So
not
I had
like that with
two.
everything, but it is with a lot.
Yeah. So before I went to Maryland, I had a therapist who wasn't a trauma informed therapist mentioned EMDR. So I got two experiences that one was good, one was bad. I she said, "Do you want to try EMDR?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." But the problem was back in 2019, I had so much stuff packed in my head that I had to unpack,
Yeah.
and I don't really think she was up to date on like EMDR,
Yeah.
you know. So she gives me these same thing, gave me the vibrating paddles, and she starts asking me, and she's like, I want you to think about what your trauma is, and let's go there. And I'm like, man, I got so much in my head. I got so much that
Yeah. I
it
don't
just
even know where to
didn't.
begin.
I don't even know where to begin. It didn't work for me.
Yep.
And she's like, "Oh no, this works. This works. Like if you really think about it, it's going to come to the forefront. It's going to come to the forefront." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's really not."
Yep.
So I left there. I never went back. So fast forward to a couple years ago. I was still struggling. Like I said, I was still struggling with stuff, a lot of the guilt. And I went to a thing called Ohio Assist, and they offered. I actually volunteer for them now. I'm a peer for them, but I got to see a therapist, and she says, "Hey, would you like to? What do you struggle with?" And one of the things I struggle with was when I lecture, I show my video, and in that video, my son talks about coming down on me that night and finding me with a gun and taking my guns from me. And when I start to lecture, I would get all emotional because it was still raw to me. It was just that guilt that I still carried. So she said, "Let's try EMDR." So I was like, "Yeah." So we did this, and as soon as she started asking me about it, it was crazy. Put those vibrator pads in my hand. She starts asking me about it. The floodgates opened. I was just a mess. I
Yeah.
was a mess. We did it like 5 or 6 times or something like that. And at the end of it, when we got done, she said, I want you to think how you feel right now. And I'm like, peace. I
Yeah.
just had this like it just washed over me like this peace. And now, usually I can go lecture now and not get emotional. I still do every once in a while. It's okay. I'm not
I
embarrassed
think it,
about it.
I think it depends on where you are, what's going on, how tired you are. Because there's times I have a video that I share from my daughter that she had sent to me, and this video has made lots of heroes cry. If you've been in my PTSD class, you know which one I'm talking about. I was struggling. I was having a lot of anxiety. I had to go to Washington D.C. I'm a country mouse. I don't do the city well. I was just having a lot of anxiety and didn't want to go. And when I got to the hotel that night, it's like 11 o'clock, and I get a message from her, and it was a video. At first, I'm like,
Mhm.
why is she not in bed? And it was a video of her singing the song "When the Storm Blows Through" to me.
Yeah.
And oh boy, did it hit me in the feels. Now, sometimes I show that video and I'm just like super proud of the work that I've done. I'm smiling, and then other times I'm blubbering like an idiot because of just whatever's going on at our time. And
Yeah.
we always say, go back to the little sayings I have. I didn't coin this phrase that it's okay to not be okay, but on my hero stickers, I add to it that yeah, it is okay to not be okay. It's just not okay to stay there.
Right. I say that in my book. I
Yeah.
use that line in my book. So,
Yeah. You
yeah.
just
And so, yes, I just like I said, I think the book is it's going to speak to everybody, and I really think, to me, honestly, Tracy, if it just helps one person, it's been worth it to me. We say that a lot. It's worth
well,
it to me,
I'll
but
let you know. It has
yeah,
already helped one person. This
thank you,
person.
thank you,
Because
yeah,
you asked me to be a part of that book, and I was able to share parts of my story in the book. And even just that, right? It shows that I'm living my purpose and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
yeah.
And I also heard a rumor that I might be giving some of those books away during the 2025 National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week. So
It would be amazing. Thank you so much. That would be
Yeah,
amazing.
I'm very excited about that. So when will the book potentially be launching? I know
Yeah.
that sometimes we run into snags, but when is your hope if folks are looking for the book? So this is going to
Mhm.
come out in the next couple of weeks, but it's not out yet.
Correct.
So time frame
So
wise?
I'm thinking within the next, couple months. I can't.
Okay.
It's already at the publication. They've got the manuscript, so it's just jump through all the hoops, and then it could be anywhere between a month to 2 months, somewhere around there. But it's
So I'm
coming
going to
soon.
say for those that are listening to this, like on, it just goes again. We're going to say like by summer of 2025, hopefully we have a book in our hands, Unseen Battles,
Yes.
that we can
Yes.
um, do. And I'm gonna put a shameless plug out there for myself. I would love an audiobook version because like I can't read books like I used to.
Yeah.
I like to listen to them. So maybe you
So
should do that too.
I'm getting the book out first, and then we're going to work on an audio version.
Yeah,
So,
I think
yep.
that's important.
Yep. I do too. Yep.
So, well, Tommy, thank you so much. I know it's taken us a little bit to get here and get recording, but I appreciate you. And,
Yes.
I am beyond thankful that you were part of my story, where our paths were supposed to cross. I'm thankful for AK, kind of being that conduit for us all to get together. And I tend to come to Ohio quite a bit. So hopefully
Yeah.
maybe we can all get together and
Yeah. That'd
share
be
a
awesome.
meal
That'd be
and
great.
talk about the amazing
Yeah.
things that are going on for all of us. So
Yeah, that
thank
would be
you.
great, Casey. Hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you having me. It's an honor, and I'm proud of you for what you're doing too,
Thank you.
in the first responder community. So thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Well, we got to go save some lives, my friend.
All right, you take care.
Hey, heroes. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and follow us on our On Scene First social media so you too can keep up with our shenanigans. And make sure you get to know our friends over at Squad Life. You can start by heading over to their social media, giving them a follow, and thank them for being a hero sponsor. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and stay here. We need you.